We are interviewing Kate Oelrich, now Mrs. Stuart Seaman, in her home in Princeton, September the 10th, 1976.
Starting where Sky Blue Lodge is and coming towards Princeton. I should have said Old Time Residence. From where Sky Blue Lodge
Tell us when
is.
you're going to start and recite now.
No. Okay, I can start now.
Okay, push it.
Now what I want starting where Sky Blue Lodge is and coming towards Princeton. John Burns, bachelor, farmer and trapper, owned a team of horses, used to drive into Princeton for supplies. His place was bought by Jack Thin and his wife, raised George and Mark Mitchell. Then bought by Matt Anderson and his wife and two daughters. He created Sky Blue Lodge, daughter Gloria Stout. There was also bachelor Murray. All I ever heard was Old Murray. Ole Bergeson, bachelor farmer, drove a team into Princeton in summer and would ski in winter. Sold to Jim Harrison, who sold to Jim and Dave Archibald. They ran a sawmill and sold to Martin and Higman, who sold to Jack Muncy. Bill Scrooby used to go and come, lived there in summer and acquired by Mrs. Waugh, now Summer Homes. And there was Jack Headley and his brother Hazeldine and wife farmed. They were English, bought by Mark Mitchell, and Dry Lake service station started by George Mitchell, sold to George Smythe. And Mackenzie, laird of the 1 Mile, goat man, once loaned his black saddle pony to a hunter friend, who tied the black to a tree, walked away, then shot what he thought was a black bear. Right here. To be the black saddle pony. Knudsen Place, related to Mabel Prosser, and just up the creek from Johnny Carlson, Perry McIntyre's place, and Duke Press lives there now. E.F. Ulrich could have bought or perhaps traded from Bill Allison about 1892 or thereabouts. Passed on and willed to Sarah Ulrich, who turned it over to their son Richard, who sold it to Hugh Anderson after World War II. Al Hoover and Jim Ambrose acquired it and sold it to Ted Cochran. Then Bob Baird bought it. And then Canning, I think his name was Canning, lived there. And then William Hagerman, inherited by daughters, occupied by Tom and Elsie Baird, occupied by Walter and Howard, Ines Baird, bought by Tommy Mitchell. Red Paddy Riley, 1920 or 21, DeMuth Sawmills, Kettle Valley Sawmills, and Jack Muncy. I don't know exactly. It was either 1892 or 93, but he wasn't married till 1898.
And where did he come from?
Came from the coast because he used to talk about...
Well, wasn't he an American?
Yes, but he used to talk about living on oysters, digging them on him and some other fellow dug oysters. But he came from Boston.
That's it.
New York.
That's what was in my mind.
Yeah,
And
that's where he was born and raised. But he was worked all over the United States from the time he was about 25 or something. But they sent him over to Germany to take an apprenticeship in cooking when he was after he was out of school, because they no way could they get along with him. And he took this apprenticeship over. Then he came back and he went cooking in a big hotel in Chicago. I don't know how many years. He never did say how many years he cooked there. But that time they used to drink like everything, you know, and finally he was taken ill and went to the doctor or something, and the doctor said, if you don't get out of there pretty soon, he said, they're going to take you out feet first. I've heard him tell that so many times, it's like I was there. So from there he wandered off, and I guess he worked. He used to say he bummed, but he never bummed. He always worked for a living. All over the U.S., just about every state in the Union.
you don't know how he happened to come to BC?
Well, him and another fellow, they went into partnership in Montana, I think, or Idaho. They had a ranch there, and this partner was supposed to look after the ranch while he went out and earned money so they could buy stock to stock it with cattle, beef cattle they were going to get. And when he come back, after he's been working for a year or so, Had all this money to buy cattle. There was nothing. The place was deserted and everything that was saleable was sold. So he was so disgusted, he just walked out, and I think that's when he came to BC.
Well, do you know when he first came? You say he was around the coast, but you don't know anything about it.
No, I haven't.
And did he work before he took up here? Before he took up the
He used to
farm?
pack supplies in here from camels on horseback. I've heard him say that. And then when him and mother were married,
That's
he went to Kamloops and bought what they used to call a freight wagon, and brought it through from Aston Grove. They come through the Otter Valley because there was only a horse pack trail through here, from where the highway is now through Merritt. And that's how he brought her home. And they lived in that little 2x4 cabin, log cabin Johnny was born there. And I think Carrie was born there too.
for 3 years.
Must have lived there 4 or 5 years. And then, because I'm sure I don't think I was born in there, because the first thing I remember is the big old house where we grew up in. And when I was I think I was about 4, when Dad got a bunch of lumber and gathered up it took him a while to get enough money to buy it, to put on that great big kitchen we had on the end of it. And the upstairs,
And where was this big house, Kate?
where Hugh Anderson is, out the 1 mile, out the Merritt Highway.
Oh.
It's 7, almost 8 miles from Princeton. I don't know if you know it or not. You know where Baird's place?
They started on cattle, did they, first? With cattle, farming.
Mm-hmm.
And when did they go in for sheep?
Oh. I think we started school when I was 11 years old. We had sheep a year or so before that because we were herding them. Us kids were herding them before we started school.
18,
And then when we started to
17.
school, we'd either take a day about, there were 3 of us, Gert and I and Grace. One day she'd go, and then one day I'd go, and then later on we got so we'd stay a whole week with them and then go to school for 2 weeks. You see, there was 3 of us, so they divided amongst the 3 of us.
They had the small herds of sheep, and did they ever run many cattle?
No, 150 was a lot of cattle.
Yeah, quite a few.
50 to 70, 50 ewes and a ram, and then the crop, the lamb crop. Not as big around as this room.
That was a well, was it?
It was a natural spring, and the water never changed temperature from one year's end to the next. It was always the same temperature, summer and winter.
It never froze.
It never froze, and even the water where the stream ran out of it never froze. But the creek would freeze over, but this stream running out of that
And the whole
spring,
thing was came up in the shape of a funnel, only twisted.
well, we used to get look down in there, and you could see how it'd go down this way and kind of turn. And away at the bottom, I have no idea how deep it was. You could see a funnel or a tunnel go off to one side from it, but not towards the creek, the opposite way. So I think it was an underground creek from up the
And the
mountain.
fish in it.
Oh, fish! I fished in there lots. Even since I come away from home, I've been away. I've gone back there
And
fishing.
is this under?
Yeah, how it goes up in the fountain there in the spring, just up and down. When
That was the other ones. There's 2 way out in the middle of the field. One of them he filled up with rocks, or tried to, but there's still water in it. And the other one is a huge big thing. It's way bigger around than this room, almost. Well, not as big as the house. But there's fish in that too. And there's a little addition to it off to one side of it. This spring in there, and that you can see the water coming up out of it.
For
And you
goodness
can
sake.
see in the bottom of the big one, the water boiling up in it.
For goodness sake. Who
Like-
owns the property now with the springs on it?
Hugh Anderson.
Oh, it's the same property?
Yes, it's the same property
Oh,
out
I
the
see.
1 mile where
I see.
Hughie Anderson lives,
Uh-huh.
Roland.
Oh, back to Percy Roland again.
Well, he was, what did they call him, the 1 mile taxi or something for years and years. Anybody wanted to go anywhere,
He was always willing to take them.
get on the horse and go and get Percy. He'll take you down. Many's the time we went down to get old Percy Rowland to take somebody that was ill into the hospital. He had the only car in the country, I guess was the reason.
Oh, I see.
He was
Uh-huh.
good natured.
And I never mentioned Jim McKinnon. He used to do that too. That was after the sawmill.
The school down at Demuth's Mill was built in what year? 1918?
No, just a minute now. Tell how you started in the old place.
Oh yes, down where Jackie Powell is. You know Jackie? Oh,
Mhm.
you know
Yes,
Jackie. Well,
yeah.
he lived in the house until he got his trailer. He lived in the house where we went to school, where we started school.
Mm-hmm.
All due to my dad going after it, because no way did he want his kids to grow up being what do they call it?
Illiterate.
Illiterate, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So he went to work and he got everybody interested, and they managed to get a teacher. I was going to mention that too in there,
Well,
the
it's on
teachers'
the
names.
table.
How long were they in that school? 4 or 5 years? Do you remember?
Well, Mrs.
11 you started and you were 14 in the other.
Yeah, that was 4 years then.
About.
But there was Miss Miller first, wasn't it, or Mrs. Graham? No, Mrs. Graham.
Mrs. Graham.
And Dorothy and Mabel are her daughters. She taught Mabel, and Dorothy was going to high school someplace. And then from there we went to, I can't remember all the teachers' names. Sailor Woods, well, that was his name. I couldn't think of his name.
Because I can remember Sailor Woods.
He
quite
was,
well.
he must have been on the seas, was he?
Oh, I didn't mean that to be on. No, he was around.
I
They,
don't remember him at all.
I can remember walking down to Martin's when I was very small. We used to go at the ranch in the summer. And he was sitting out in front of they had chickens, same as Johnny Howe.
Dad was entirely responsible for the schoolhouse, as he took out a personal loan to buy the lumber and other supplies necessary to build it. I don't know who or how many worked to build it, though. I just know that school was let out for summer holidays at the little three-room house where Jackie Paul is now, and where the back 2 rooms were the teachers' home, and the front room was our schoolroom, and started in the new school in the fall. Percy Rowland was elected to hire a teacher and see that she arrived safely. Percy did any book work that had to be done. During World War II, the little school closed because of a shortage of teachers, and everyone used to kid Percy about trading a teacher for a school bus, because from then on a bus has been running out there. Percy did have a teacher too, but they wanted one more in Princeton School. Since World War II, the school sat vacant until it was bought by Harold Allison for taxes, and now Henry Fremp has his home there. After World War II, John Huey and Harold Allison bought Percy Rowland out. Then Harold owned the lower place where Jackie Powell is, where we lived for 17 years and paid $5 a month rent for the old schoolhouse, which had a porch and a back bedroom added to it. Last 4 or 5 years we lived there, we paid $10 a month. Dillard at Missoula Lake had only a saddle horse, Tony, that he'd said he could ride into a bar for a drink. I don't know about that, but after we got Tony in a trade for a young unbroken filly, we used to ride him almost any place and could lead him across a large footlog. A footlog is a log spanning a creek or a steep draw, and we could save time by crossing on the footlog. There were several in the hills we used when we were young. As I think back on my wonderful memories, I must write a few lines on our wonderful cranky old dad, or Papa, as we were taught to say when we were small. As we got older and he got older, we called him Pa, and then Pop, then Dad. He was the hardest working person I've ever known in my whole life. In winter he spent a lot of time sawing and cutting wood, all by hand for the house. He milked cows until we were old enough to do it, I'd say 7 or 8 years. There were always chickens, pigs, cows, horses, and later on sheep. A couple of times he should never have been anywhere near cows or horses. He could make a cow mean to milk just by his loud swearing at her if she didn't please him, or cause a team to run away by hollering too loud at them. In spring or summer he would rise at daylight to weed his garden, and in haying time he would work till dark. Our beloved mother worked right along with him, doing the lighter tasks. On reading over my recollections, I find that I have barely mentioned our beloved mother, who worked outdoors and in just as hard as many of the hired hands we had. She always had an orphan or two that followed after her, mostly a creature that had taken sick for one reason or another. I remember one young turkey that looked about done in from unknown causes. But he started to get better and eat of his own accord. He did completely recover to be butchered with about 75 or 100 more others at Christmas time. It just happened we got that one ourselves, and when drawn to cook we found a large darning needle had pierced his gizzard and the flesh had grown around it, so that the outside of the gizzard was overgrown with flesh of the same material as the gizzard. And a runty pig or two she would raise to good big porkers come time to butcher them. She could heal sores on horses caused by harness or saddles, or doctor sick calves so long as there was no need for an operation. For 2 or 3 summers after us kids were grown up and gone, or so the younger ones could go to school, she herded sheep and carried a rifle to shoot coyotes that were after the sheep. She could butcher a cow or shear a sheep and skin it out, dress it and cut it up too. She would help Dad to make salt pork or corned beef, doing most of this work. I don't want to give the wrong impression here, as Dad had his work cut out for him too. Lots of times he would be up at daybreak and do 3 or 4 hours of work before breakfast. Mother would hitch up a team and use the harrows or drive to town all in the day's work. She used to hunt deer at one time too. Lots of times we would have venison that she had shot. There were plenty of deer at that time, but you had to be smart to get near enough to shoot a buck. She could sew and cook too, but it was never fancy, although visitors at one time told her she was the best cook in the country. We always had plenty of good food, seldom ever had pies, and only had cake at birthdays. The first pie I ever tasted was lemon pie on Christmas, made by Dad. Way back when I was a little girl and our house was only partly finished and needed an addition on it, a carpenter, Finnegan, I never heard or don't remember any other name, was there. He used to entertain us little fellows with funny stories of all kinds. He used to tell also about spending the winters in Mexico. Read this. He said we shouldn't bite our fingernails or we would grow horns. He had a couple of wens on his head and told us they were horns and caused by chewing his fingernails when he was small. I was only 3 or 4 years old when he was around. He just had to be Irish. I remember Jim Brown quite well. Helped clear land, helped in the hayfield, used to cut wood, and when he wasn't working he would be out prospecting in our hills. Jerry Frame I just barely remember coming to the house in summer. All these old fellows just left and we kids never heard any more about them. A sad tale, Mr. Schockemeyer. It happened in the hungry 30s. I was home for a few weeks. We saw a horse and wagon coming our way. When it arrived there was only a thin old man driving Topsy, as he called his brown mare. He stopped and asked if he could camp overnight and maybe buy some food. Dad asked him if he would help in the haying while the weather was good. When he started talking, he told a very sad story about his wife becoming very ill and he lost her, so he decided to pack up what belongings he had and carry on with the plans they had made together and find a new life in the Peace River country. He was from somewhere in Montana, and he and his wife had such a hard time trying to make a living there that when they heard about what a beautiful rich country the Peace River was in northern BC, they wanted to go there. After he lost her, he decided to go anyway. On his way he lost his dog and one of his horses from drinking water from a poisoned spring. He managed to survive and was on his way when he arrived at our place. He worked a week or so and was taken seriously ill. Dad took him to the Princeton hospital. By the time they found out what was wrong with him, he was too far gone and he passed away. I remember thinking he must have been over 6 feet tall and was skin and bone. We fell heir to his worldly belongings, including the local Topsy horse. His last name was Schockemeyer. He didn't speak good English and was German.